Here.
Commissioner Landris,
Here.
Commissioner Raskin,
Here.
Commissioner Reese,
Here.
and Chair Pastor.
Thank you. We've got a full house tonight. Thank you, everyone. Let's move right into the Planning Director's report.
Good evening, Commission. Happy New Year. Nice to see you all. While I wait for the screen to come up, I will just mention that in terms of City Hall reopening, next Monday, January 10th, is when we will reopen the front doors to City Hall. If you haven't been by recently, the fountains are running again. They still have one more to work on or turn back on in Tonga Park, but nice to see things getting back to normal a little bit in front of City Hall. And again, people will be able to come into the front doors and circulate throughout the building. We are still allowing staff to telework, not requiring people to come back on a regular basis. They could keep working the way they've been working. Given the Omicron variant that's become so prevalent, we've delayed making any kind of requirements staff for the next foreseeable future. Let's put it that way. Also, in terms of the counter hours, we are having the permit center open still by appointment only, but the hours will be extended, so it'll be 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. But again, it will just be by by appointment only. Coming up at the Planning Commission on January 19th is a development review permit for the Crossroads for a performance center. And then on January 26th, we're planning a special meeting to present the St. John's Development Agreement to the Commission. No City Council actions to report since our last meeting. Coming up at City Council, which just by the way, next week, January 11th, will be virtual only. So as I'm sure you know, the council has been meeting in council chambers, but again, because of the new COVID variant, the meeting next week will be completely online. And then January 25th, IZO extension for the process thresholds, and then also an IZO for permitting time extensions and convert allowances in the current emergency orders. Housing element, February 2nd, red lines for phase 1 implementation. And then, as I mentioned, the reopening dates, next Monday, January 10th, permit center, 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. by appointment only. And then the virtual counter will continue so that even though the counter will be open longer hours, the virtual counter will still be available to applicants at least through the end of January. That concludes my report. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, David.
Sure.
Commissioner Fonda-Bernardi, and then.
Yeah, this is a question for you, David. It's very exciting that the permit center is reopening, but you say we're still going to make an appointment. Can we make that appointment online, or do we have to actually go in there, make the appointment, and then come back?
You can make the appointment online, yes.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, and from what I understand, it's within a day or two, you should be able to get it. Ariel said.
Commissioner Lambert.
Have you received any indication from HCD as to when their final certification or not certification for our housing element will happen?
I have not heard anything directly from them. Jing may have had more recent contact.
Yeah, we haven't heard any. We've received no communication about our submittal thus far.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Commissioner Raskin.
Yeah, so I've received some inquiries from members of the public about work that's being done with respect to implementing SB 9. So I understand that there's work going on right now to potentially craft guidelines or bring forward some sort of resolution to deal with that, and I'm hoping you can just give a real quick update about that.
Yeah, there is an information item that went out just within the last week or so. I think Jing would be able to explain it. She actually wrote the information item, so she has the most recent information.
Yeah, so it was posted on the council website, where we'd be happy to email that link to the commission. There was actually like a blog post that has a very boiled down, version of what SB9 is, and a link to the info item in there. As you're all probably aware, it is actually a very complex law, much more than meets the eye. And we've been trying to untangle it. We've had a phone conversation with HCD staff. We have a phone conversation scheduled with the bill author's office as well, just to see some clarity around those things. And of course, working with the city attorney's office to understand the law itself. We're working on application forms that will be added to that blog post in addition to FAQs. And I can report that thus far we've received no applications, or anyone trying to submit an application about it. It's just sort of very general inquiries, I think more just curiosity at this point as to what it entails, because obviously it's brand new, took effect January 1, but the info item is up that's intended to explain what SB9 is, what you can do, what's allowed in it, its effects, potential effects in Santa Monica, and then kind of has a listing at the end of what we're exploring for ordinance implementation. And, I think at this point we are still kind of, we're planning to bring that forward in line with housing element implementation. So we'd be working on those red lines. Certainly prior to that, council may request, either through a 13-item direction or, ask for some study sessions. So we're just working with also the city manager's office as to the best approach, to bring that information forward.
Mr. Orlando.
So thank you, Jing. I'm absolutely aware of and have heard, that there are lots of strong feelings about SB9 on all sides. I did read the article in today's Daily Press, and I do want to express concern. It goes to Commissioner Lambert's earlier question about the certification of the housing element. It would be really unfortunate if the perception were given that the city was looking to somehow stymie the intended implementation of SB9. I want to distinguish between what SB9 intends and what SB9 sort of allows. I don't want to get into the details here because we're not agendized, but I do want to express my concern, particularly with the housing element not having been approved, that we not give any impression to anyone that we are looking to roll back the impact of state housing laws. I think that could have a strongly negative effect on our legal position in defending our housing element and in defending our zoning ordinance. And I would like to make sure that the city is able to keep the promises that it's made, both to the people of Santa Monica and to the state.
Jing, do you want to respond to that, or?
No, I mean, it's not agendized, so I don't want to kind of continue the conversation, but I think that's noted. At this point, it's the info item is just presenting information, and we can't. I think very quickly we can't speak to what was intended. We can only interpret what is actually written in the statute and explain to folks, this is what it says. And then kind of present those options, because we again, this has not been before the council in terms of direction on how they want to proceed. And that's why, we'll be working with the manager's office on how to best bring that information forward and get policy direction, on how the council wishes to proceed with any implementation ordinance.
Jing, are you all also looking at implementation of SB 8 as it modifies SB 330?
Yeah, I mean, to the extent that we need to, I mean, I think it establishes, what it is, and to the extent that it's necessary to make any local amendments to, be consistent or to clarify anything, we will of course bring that forward as well.
Yeah, I know in many jurisdictions there's a lot of consternation about how a determination of protected units is being made. And so I think it's just important that it's really clear to the public that what is required and how that determination is for all development projects, since it now applies to ministerial and discretionary projects. And with regards to SB 9, I just want to also mention that I know that LA received a letter and a plan from the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy, in which the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy basically is saying these are the protected areas based on this conservation plan. So I don't know if Santa Monica has received a similar thing, but just as a point of reference. And that just happened yesterday.
Thank you for that information. Yeah, I'm not aware of us receiving correspondence regarding that thus far.
Anything else before we move on to Planning Commissioner announcements? So I'm going to go ahead and announce tonight's public comment procedures. Please note tonight's procedure for public comment. We are accepting real-time oral public comment by phone for each item. Please check the top of the posted agenda for the phone number to call once the caller queue for each item opens. The caller queue will open when each item is introduced and will close after the first 5 minutes. After the first 5 public comments are heard. Repeat that again. The caller queue will open when each item is introduced and will close after the first 5 public comments are heard. Written comments received up until noon today have been read by the Commission. Comments received after 12 p.m. today will be considered a part of the record of proceedings, but will not be posted online with the Planning Commission's agenda prior to the meeting. With regard to the moderator chat, the moderator chat function in Blue Jeans, which on mine is on the right of my screen, is for technical help from administrative staff only. It is not for public comment. I repeat, it is not for public comment. The Commission cannot see the chat, and comments will not be forwarded to the Commission or entered into the record. Do I have any Commission announcements tonight? Okay. The next item is the consent calendar, and we don't have anything on that calendar. No study session, no continued items, and no staff administrative items. That brings us to the public hearing, which is item 6. And we're going to start with 6A, which is 1416 Wilshire Boulevard, which is a conditional use permit to establish a medicinal cannabis retail use occupying approximately 2,480 square feet of tenant space in the mixed-use boulevard zoning. Who is going to be giving the staff presentation? Tony, is that you?
Yes, that would be me.
Okay, and before you start, Melissa, will you just put that up for one more minute? Melissa has posted the public comment number. So the queue is now open and you can call in. Till after the first 5 public comments.
And Chair, we could do ex partes?
Oh, yes, thank you. Let's do ex partes. Anyone need to raise their hand? Okay, I do need to make a disclosure, which is that my law firm of Glazer Weil is representing a cannabis company in a permitting lawsuit in which Harvest is on the other side of the case. I have no involvement in this lawsuit, or have had very little involvement. There is no actual conflict, and I do not think that my participation, that my firm's participation in that lawsuit is going to in any way impact my decision on this matter. And so I don't feel like I need to recuse myself, but I wanted to disclose that to the public. Commissioner Orlando.
Yeah, because this came up last month, I want to make sure that the letters that we received, particularly the recent ones, I believe they CC'd planning comment, and so I just want to make sure that we are all aware of the emails. I mentioned this because I had forwarded to Melissa an email that I believe that I had not read, prior to the meeting, but it turns out that it wasn't sent to planning comments, and so it's been added to the record for last month's meeting. There was no conflict. I didn't see the communication, but I want to make sure that we're all on the same page here. I have emails from Mr. Galamba and Ms. Van Denberg related to this item that came in late, but I believe planning comment was CC'd. I don't see other emails, so I just want to say for the record that I've done my best to clear that email queue, and I'm not aware of other correspondence that has not been publicly posted.
So let's go ahead and move to the staff report.
Great. Thank you, and good evening, and Happy New Year, Commissioners.
Happy New Year.
Thank you. For you tonight is a conditional use permit request for a medicinal cannabis retailer at 1416 Wilshire Boulevard. The subject site is located on the south side of Wilshire Boulevard between 14th Street and 15th Street in the mixed-use Boulevard district. And they also established a regulatory framework for a selection and permitting process for potential retailers. The IZO is extended a few times and is effective through January of next year. And as the Commission may recall, in October of last year, you approved the first medicinal cannabis retailer CUP. The retailer selection process was established and codified in the municipal code. The city conducted an extensive selection process in which 21 qualified applications were received. An evaluation committee ranked all of the qualified candidates based on objective criteria. And then the director of community development selected the top 2 ranked applicants, of which tonight's applicant is one of them. Following a lengthy appeals process, the preliminary selection letters were sent to the 2 top applicants, including the applicant tonight, Harvest of Santa Monica. In addition to the CUP, Harvest of Santa Monica is required to obtain a medicinal cannabis retailer permit, as well as all applicable state licenses and permits. The proposed cannabis retailer would occupy 2 existing tenant spaces that would be combined into 1 tenant space, measuring approximately 2,480 square feet in size, which is below the maximum of 2,500 square feet that's permitted. The proposed hours of operation would be Monday through Saturday, 10 to 8 p.m., and Sunday, 12 to 7 p.m. This is the proposed front elevation showing these 2 combined tenant spaces into the subject tenant space. As I mentioned, the tenant space is about 2,480 square feet. A small portion of that is on the 2nd floor at the rear of the tenant space. The majority of the tenant space is on the ground floor, with the retail area encompassing approximately 1,229 square feet in the purple shaded area accessed from Wilshire Boulevard. And this includes an education space as well as an express pickup area. The rest of the tenant space would be ancillary office and storage space. There would be no recommendations issued on site. No cultivation or consumption on site would be allowed as well. Identification would be required upon entry to confirm that anyone entering is of at least 18 years of age and is a medical patient or a primary caregiver. Again, the proposed operations Monday through Saturday, 10 to 8, and Sunday, 12 to 7, and deliveries would only be allowed during regular business hours. The proposed use is consistent with the lease to provide ground floor retail along Wilshire Boulevard. It complies with the municipal code and is not within 600 feet of any sensitive uses. As conditioned, we do not believe it will create any adverse or negative impacts on the area. Some of the relevant conditions of approval are the limited hours of operation, as well as the operations to be conducted in accordance with all applicable law at all times. No recommendations for medicinal cannabis shall be issued on site. There are limitations on exterior activity and noise, as well as prohibitions on consumption or use at the subject property. Verification of age, physician's recommendation, and proof of caregiver status will be required. And if the permittee vacates the premises, any successor would be required to obtain a new CUP. Public notices were mailed to all property owners and tenants within a 750-foot radius. The notice was posted in the Santa Monica Daily Press. The applicant conducted a community meeting with the Wilmot neighborhood group, and we have received, I believe we're up to 20 written comments, all of which are in opposition to the proposed use, mainly with the concern about the proximity of the use to Lincoln Middle School. With that, staff is recommending approval of the conditional use permit and adoption of the statement of official action. Thank you.
Let's go to questions for Tony. Commissioner Fresco, and then Commissioner Leon.
You're muted, Nina.
Our ordinance only covers medical marijuana use, isn't that correct?
That is correct. Only medicinal is permitted in the city.
So there's no possibility that this could convert to a recreational marijuana dispensary, is that right?
That's correct.
And I had there's a lot of state laws which I think are reflected in the staff report and in the conditions about trash disposal and how you dispose of any trash related to marijuana. But the staff report, so I understood why all that was there, but the staff report mentioned a number of times that the cannabis that will be sold here will be grown in California. Is there a reason for that? Is there a reason why we care about that, or are we just being prideful that we can grow it here, or what's the deal with that?
That is a good question. That is what was established in our ordinance. I'm not completely sure the origin of that, but I believe there are some legal ramifications to that. And I don't know if Heidi wants to chime in, but I believe it involves keeping everything within state lines and not transporting across state lines.
That's fair.
Yes, essentially it is to ensure that it is a state regulated closed circuit system and nothing leaves the state that has been grown in the state.
I see. Thank you. Cool. Those are my questions.
Commissioner Lambert, then Commissioner Reese.
I have a couple questions. I know we've all read the letters of opposition from Lincoln Middle School parents. So my question goes to, what is the security in this facility? Is the door locked and access is only through intercom, or how does that work? And if not, could we require that?
Sure. I believe that question will have to be directed to the applicant.
Okay, but we could require that as a condition, correct? Yes. The other question I have, there was a letter from a business on, I didn't get exactly where it was, but it seemed that it was within 600 feet. And it's some kind of tutoring service, if I remember correctly. Does that kind of business fall within the categories of our code that about the 600 feet, or is that separate?
That would not. The code prohibits any schools from being within the 600-foot radius, but that type of use, the tutoring use, would be classified as an instructional service land use, which is not a school.
Okay, and then I want to reaffirm what you said to Nina. This is not a recreational marijuana shop. I mean, don't go in and buy cookies and gummy bears and what have you. It is strictly medicinal, and you have to have a prescription to get anything from them, correct?
That's correct. I can't speak for the type of products, but it is by prescription only.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Reese.
Commissioner Lambert asked my first question about the 310 tutoring. So my second question would be, Tony, would you share with the commission our email exchange about I had asked you to give me a comparison of the conditions from this project to the last and where they deviated?
Sure. The only differences in the conditions of approval between what's before you tonight and the other retailer, as the commission may recall, they modified the hours of operation for the first retailer to close at 6 p.m. on Sundays as opposed to 7. And then a condition was added about the storefront glazing to work with staff to make sure that that was as pedestrian oriented as possible, given that the existing glass at the other site was already fully glazed, whereas this site, the glazing is clear and the applicant is proposing to maintain that glazing, so that condition was not carried over to the CUP.
Great. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Commissioner Landris.
Thank you. I guess I have a question for staff and for our city attorney. I am noticing that these two applications, and it's been pointed out in the letter, these two applications are quite close to each other on one side of Santa Monica. As part of the selection, so it's a double question. As part of the selection process, was any consideration given to the geographic distribution across the city of prospective license holders or permit holders? That's my first question. And my second question is there, well, three questions. Is there any, can the commission take that into account in its deliberations? The proximity of the second license holder to the first under consideration, and what would be the appropriate way for the commission, should it choose to seek to ensure that the permits are equitably distributed throughout the city's geography?
Sure, I can take a
just to clarify, I'm not going anywhere. I just really want to know what happened and what the options are before the commission, so we're all on the same page about what we can do.
Absolutely, and I can take a stab at those questions, and Heidi, if you want to jump in, please feel free to. So in terms of the evaluation process, I don't believe location was really factored in, given that our ordinance already specifically defined where these potential dispensaries could be located. And really, there are only two areas of the city, basically east of Lincoln Boulevard along Wilshire, or along two stretches of Santa Monica Boulevard between Lincoln and 20th and 23rd and Centinela. And so when these applicants provided their applications and went through the evaluation process, this is before they had secured any locations. They had to get through the process first to see if they would be allowed to move forward in the process. And if they did, at that point, they would be able to look for their locations given the parameters, geographic parameters set in the ordinance. Given the 600-foot radius minimum buffer from sensitive uses, taking that in conjunction with the two stretches of Wilshire and Santa Monica where they could be located, those two limitations really limit the number of potential places that these two dispensaries could be located. So in terms of the commission's review of the location of this one in relation to the other one, I think all we can go by is, do they meet that 600-foot buffer from another dispensary, which this does. If the commission feels that this location may not be appropriate, then they'd have to review that based on the findings of compatibility for this particular CUP with the neighborhood. And then, I'm sorry, what was the third question?
Well, so I'll ask the follow-up, which is, there are only two permits out there at all. We've given away the first one,
Correct.
And if we give away the second one tonight, there is no possibility for someone on Santa Monica east of 23rd Street, for example, which is very clearly a different neighborhood. It may not be as far south as, to be radically distant, but it is certainly far, far away within the context of what far means in Santa Monica. There would not be a possibility of a medical marijuana cannabis dispensary in that part of town because the permits would be all gone. So I am a little bit at a loss as to whether or not we would be essentially doubling down on a kind of geographic inequity on this medicinal use, and would like some clarification from the city attorney as to whether that can be a consideration or should be, and how that plays out. I'm concerned about I'm concerned about sticking them both in more or less the same place and then not having any other options for other businesses in other parts of the city.
Sure. So I think it essentially, because what is before you, although there was the selection process, as Mr. Kim explained, occurred according to a process that was set up outside of the zoning ordinance. So that has been completed. The second step in that process is to come through the zoning process, through the land use process, which is what's occurring now. So what your purview this evening is really the CUP piece, right? So the regulatory piece has been taken care of through that selection process. And then on the back end through a business license and enforcement and all those things. But so what before you right now is a CUP. And so you have certain, there are certain objective standards that are set forth in that IZO that Mr. Kim explained, like the distance, the minimum distance from the sensitive uses and the minimum distance from the other dispensaries. Beyond that, it is a CUP like any other CUP, so you're being asked to make the findings for a CUP based on the evidence that is presented to you this evening. So if you feel that there's evidence presented to you that weighs one way or the other in terms of approval or disapproval, then that's how you would evaluate it, as you would any other CUP.
Okay, thank you very much.
I have a question. I have a follow-up question. Heidi, just to distill this, do we have, given our code in this process, the legal authority to tell these people they have to be somewhere else?
If you don't, so certainly they have met what staff has presented to you has met the minimum requirements by code under the IZO for distancing. You have another reason to believe that you are unable to approve the CUP based on neighborhood compatibility, for instance, which is one of the findings. You need to base that on substantial evidence and deny it that way.
Okay, thank you.
And Tony, we got a lot of letters about the proximity to Lincoln Middle School and the route to Lincoln Middle School. Can you tell us how far this is from Lincoln Middle School and whether there's a safe route to school that passes by this facility?
I can tell you the distance is about 800 feet, Lincoln, in terms of the separation between Lincoln Middle School and the proposed tenant space. I don't know about the safe routes to school. I would have to look into that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, seeing no other questions, let's go ahead and move on.
Chair, I can just tell, I don't know if someone wants to get the map out, but I can say that 14th Street is a major north-south buffered bike lane, and I believe it is on the bike action plan.
That's a different question.
That's what I'm in terms of the safe routes to school. But I don't know who goes to Lincoln and how they get there, but I do know 14th Street is a bike route, if that's what you're asking. That's all I was going to say.
That's not what I'm asking.
Okay.
Okay. Let's go ahead and move on to the staff report, please. Or sorry, to the applicant presentation, please.
Good evening. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Ben Kimbrough with Harvest, representing on behalf of our company as the applicant, Harvest of Santa Monica. First, thank you all so much for making some time this evening for me to join you. I understand that I have a total of 15 minutes, so I'm going to move through this as expeditiously as possible so that I can respond to questions both of the commissioners and any of the public that have signed up in the queue to speak. Much of this has been covered. Again, it's about a 2,400 square foot building located at 1416 Wilshire. Approximately 20 parking spots in the rear of the building. The goals and objectives in this project for us include breathing new life into an existing empty storefront to serve a demand of patients where currently they have limited access and have to travel, in some cases, several miles to access medical cannabis, as well as to provide an image, an updated and modernized image of how medical cannabis can improve people's lives and be a positive impact in the community. A little bit about Harvest and our footprint here in California. We're a publicly traded multi-state operating cannabis company that is headquartered in Tempe, Arizona. And we have currently 4 operating dispensaries in California, including Palm Springs, Venice, Grover Beach, and Napa. We really look at all of these communities that we seek to work in partnership. Something that Mr. Kim covered on this, and is often the topic of these types of discussions. We seldom ever get to be where we want to be. The sites, based on the sensitive use exclusions, kind of tell us where we have to be, and this is very much an example of that. But in every community we operate, we're really not looking to be the best cannabis company in town. We're looking to be one of the best businesses, period, in the way that we partner with community. And we do that through engendering the personality of the city by being better listeners than talkers. And we take a lot of pride in hosting a lot of educational events, a lot of support groups, and we give generously of our time and money with local philanthropic partners. Security is always a focus. It's always a concern for the community, and it's always a top of mind priority for us. In everything that Harvest does, there is a security focus, and we manage that in an innovative, reliable way with very experienced security professionals. When we move into an area, we do a lot of work in collaborating with Santa Monica Police Department in this instance. We'll improve exterior lighting, add surveillance. That always has the effect of improving our traffic patterns in and around the stores. It reduces loitering. And because of the increased lighting and surveillance, these stores often represent a decrease in property and violent crime. We've got security on staff, but as well, every harvester is well trained to observe and respond accordingly to any type of problem, challenge, or emergency that they encounter. These measures just simply consistently lead to a safer community with less crime. We take youth cannabis abuse very, very seriously. We're very proud to say that we've never had a single instance of an underage sale. We simply have too much at risk for that to happen. We go through a multiple step verification which starts at the front door. I think Commissioner Lambert asked if the door could be conditioned to be locked. We will have the door secured, but when you do go into the waiting area, which is further secured away from the sales floor, and you have to have access, present ID, have it verified, present a valid DCC medical patient card to get into the sales floor. Where there is no THC product displayed, every one of the displays, even in that area, is inert. But you wouldn't see in the waiting area any images of any cannabis as a plant or as any of its various forms as a medicine. We're prohibited by law and by ethics from inadvertent marketing to passersby. So everything's going to come into the facility in a sealed package. There's all of the requisite warning labels are in place, and then we have a national security team that has very, very highly qualified folks in California in particular that provide regular and ongoing training to our security protocols and the way that we check and verify IDs. Very proud of offering a living wage. We recruit a diverse group of folks. We're going to recruit from within Santa Monica, and we offer competitive wages and comprehensive benefits packages with generous paid time off, best in show, very high quality of training in our onboarding, and as well through ongoing continuing education for our employees. With that, I'm Ben Kimbrough. That's my email. Please reach out with any questions you might have.
Let's start with Commissioner Fonder-Bernardi, and then we'll go to Commissioner Lambert.
Yeah. So you've heard already that we have a concern that these two facilities, were they to be approved, would be approved with the same conditions, so that one would not be advantaged or disadvantaged in relation to the other. And there were two conditions that are different in your case. One was the shorter time, I believe, on Sunday by an hour, as I remember, and then the tinting of the front window. Are those conditions that are something you could live with, or are they immaterial to the discussion? Are they not really going to change one way or the other?
We'd be very content with both of those conditions.
Okay.
Neither of those are going to, cramp our style or how we need to do business. There's not going to be any adverse impacts to safety or any of that sort of thing. Both of those conditions would be perfectly acceptable to us, Commissioner.
Okay. And then my last question is, we had obviously a lot of letters, a lot of concern about the relationship to the school and the distance to the school. And, and everyone understands that there's only so many places where this business can be placed, given all the other constraints. And in one of those letters, there was a discussion about having a cashless store because the presence of cash might incite the kind of criminality that we're seeing. Can you give us some thoughts on that? Is that going to be a deal breaker? Does that actually improve the store in some way? Question mark. This is a new area for us, so maybe you can educate us.
So we have trialed and piloted a number of different products that work with debit cards, that work with pre-funded accounts, and we've tried them in a number of states, a number of different communities. That technology is simply not ready for prime time. It creates problems that start to look like money laundering and transnational crime, something that we certainly don't even want to have the appearance of. Our cash controls, fair concern, by the way, a concern that I had as a guy who was on the other side of this coin for 19 years of his professional life. Our cash controls and our audits that occur throughout the day are exceptional. And we've never had any instance of a crime with relation to our deposits or funding the registers in the store. We've got a very sophisticated, well-trialed system for that. We've been, operating in medical cannabis since 2011. So by that standard, we're one of the more mature medical cannabis operators in the United States, and we have frankly figured out a very efficient, very transparent in terms of the way we manage our books and are able to share those with various government entities, the way that we manage a cash business. I find that, in fact, right now, until we get federal action on normalizing banking, our cash system very burdensome to us, and not without some pretty gougy fees at the bank. It really works quite well. In fact, more efficiently than any product I've seen so far that would allow us to be cashless.
Thank you.
You bet.
Commissioner Lambert.
I have a few questions. One is, was your locational decision making, or if not, do you think it beneficial that your proposed site is within a few blocks of the biggest concentration of medical offices in Santa Monica, meaning it would be accessible to people who are leaving their doctor's offices and walking to your facility? Is that a consideration?
It is a consideration, and it is highly desirable to us, Commissioner.
Yeah, because as you know, the medical offices are between 14th and 20th, basically, on Santa Monica and Arizona. So the accessibility is excellent. I'm confused about the locked doors situation. The door to the lobby is not locked, but the door to the drugs is? Is that?
The front door, the very first one that you would encounter, won't be locked. It will be attended by security and or a greeter. Once an ID is produced, the person is invited through the unlocked door where they're in a waiting room where their DCC credentials and driver's license get checked again. Once they're checked in, then they're permitted through a locked door that's actuated remotely by our staff.
Excellent.
Once they've completed their consultation, their point of sale is transacted, and they're ready to leave, they egress back through the same, having been allowed out, back into the waiting room, back out through the front door.
So the answer is you have security at the front door, basically.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. There was also
we really want to, we want to welcome people in, and some of the things that we get to do that have secondary security value is that we use that conversation that we initiate with them to electronically check IDs and as well visually check them with a human being.
I got it.
Mr. Lambert, can I just ask a follow-up to your question quickly? So is there a limited number of people who are allowed behind the locked door at any time? Like, is there like a 1-to-1 ratio of sales consultant to patient, or how does that work?
Yes, we like to answer your question directly. Yes, there is a limit. Obviously, we're never going to exceed the fire marshal capacity of that's assigned to that room. But we really want to work with our patients. So, these until patients are familiar with what they're looking at, a lot of this stuff is frankly pretty intimidating. So we really like to be there with them, make it, a much less intimidating. We're working toward giving ourselves the gift of health here, One of the ways that you do that is not to bring somebody in and leave them stranded in a kind of an intimidating environment. So they'll be attended to. They can't access. There's no way that they could access anything behind the sales counter. All of the product is vaulted and brought out through a pretty sophisticated sequence.
I have two more questions. One is, I assume your rear door is locked, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And alarmed.
Great. Another question that came up in some of the letters was access to garbage. If some of your materials ended up in the garbage, that students could potentially get it, etc. But your garbage receptacles are locked. Do I understand that correctly?
That's correct. Anything that we dispose of, there's a state protocol that we must go through. So you wouldn't see THC-laden materials ever disposed of in that dumpster.
Do you anticipate any of your patients throwing away stuff on their way out the door?
Certainly. It is likely that they may want to throw away a carry-out bag, the sealed bag that it comes in. A lot of people like to put those in their purse or in their jacket pocket.
I meant the drugs. They're not going to be throwing away the drugs.
No. I have yet to see anyone purchase anything and then throw it away.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Other commissioners? We move to public comment. Okay, thank you, Ben, for your presentation. We appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Okay, Melissa, how many public commenters do we have?
Currently, we just have one.
Okay.
I will go ahead and post the number in case we have any other callers. And then if you guys are ready, we could take our first and so far only caller.
Yes. And again, Ben, if you'll take yourself off camera, we'd appreciate that. Thank you.
And Chair, something happened to your camera, so we're seeing a black screen.
Thank you, Commissioner Reese. I think I put it down accidentally. I'm back. Okay, let's take our public caller, please.
Okay, hello to our caller. You are now off mute and live in the meeting. Please clearly state your name for the record, and you have 3 minutes for your statement. Well, it looks like we just lost our caller. So perhaps they were not for this item.
Okay.
Well, should I put the 1 minute timer up there to give anybody else a chance?
Yeah, why don't we do a little bit of commission discussion, and let's also see if anyone calls back in after that, just to give folks an opportunity in case they want to call. I know it's a little unorthodox, but
I have one more question of staff.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
right. Okay, let's go back to staff questions. So then Commissioner Landry.
Tony, I don't actually remember what the conditions were about the window for the other cannabis store. My understanding was they wanted to put a screen on it, and we settled on having some sort of a display that was inside of a clear window. Isn't that how it ended up? And isn't that kind of what this applicant is proposing?
What the prior retailer is actually about the storefront glazing itself. And if you'd like, I can read what that condition was.
Yes, please.
Sure. It stated that prior to the issuance of a building permit, the applicant shall work with staff to address and improve the pedestrian orientation of the storefront glazing to the extent allowable by state law.
Right. Yeah, I think that was because they wanted to code it somehow, because you're not allowed, state law says that you can't look in at the products. But, and I believe, tell me if I'm misunderstood, but I thought this application was also proposing some kind of coding on the window, but they also have a waiting room just inside that has no product in it, so they actually don't have to do that. Is that right?
Yes, that's how we're looking at it. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I understand.
Commissioner Landris?
So I just want to come back. I'm looking at the neighborhood compatibility findings, and again, if we can make the findings, great, we can do that. If we can't make the findings for whatever reason for a CUP in this location, would the applicant's position as a winner of the license be preserved so that if they went and found another location, they could come back without prejudice? Or does our denial of a CUP have any prejudicial effect on the applicant's position in the selection process?
It would not have an effect on that final selection process ranking.
Okay. And does their ranking mean that they're somehow like first in line to be able to come get a permit? Or I just so I understand, we're not choosing here tonight. I just want to understand the people who came in third, they don't get to go out for a permit, right? They couldn't go find something and bring it to us.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Commissioner Lambert?
I am very comfortable with the current location of what's being proposed. One of the reasons is accessibility to the medical offices nearby. Great deal of confidence in the security situation on site. I know there are concerns, and I think maybe perhaps the applicant, assuming this goes through, should reach out to Lincoln Middle School to see if they can work together to see, to somehow resolve some of the issues the parents are seeing. I would suggest that. But I'm very comfortable with this. The security is extraordinary, and again, people can walk from their doctor's offices to this facility, which would not be the case if it were in the eastern part of Santa Monica.
Melissa, do we have any callers?
We do not.
Okay, so let's put up the 1 minute time clock, and then what I want to do is close the public hearing, finish the Planning Commission discussion. If anybody has any additional conditions they want to add, let's get that on the record, and then let's go ahead and we'll vote.
Are we waiting for the 1 minute?
Yeah.
Okay.
But you can be poised and ready, Commissioner Lambert, to make your motion.
I'm ready for a motion after that.
Okay, I'm going to give you 32 more seconds. We can all sit here uncomfortably, staring at the screen.
In breathless anticipation of what I'm going to say.
Okay, that's it. So let's go ahead and close the caller queue, and let's close the public hearing. And is there any commissioner discussion that anyone wants to make before Commissioner Lambert makes a motion? Commissioner Fresco.
I agree. I just wanted to say I agree with Commissioner Lambert about the location. If I personally ever needed some medicinal cannabis, I might want to check out both places and compare and see what they have and see what I liked, and I wouldn't want to have to drive all over town to do that. So I also wanted to just say in regard to the concern of parents, which apparently is universal when across the nation whenever I'm sorry, I have to cough.
And while Commissioner Fresco is taking that brief break, Chair, we do have one late caller who just came in. So I did want to announce that. Are you okay with taking that at this point?
Can I get a motion to do I need a motion to reopen the public hearing?
Yeah, I move to reopen the public hearing and hear the caller for 1 minute.
Second.
Okay, can we do a roll call vote, please?
Wait a minute. Would it be friendly to ask for more than a minute? It's supposed to get 3 minutes, right?
Oh, Jesus.
Before it goes any further, commissioners, we just lost our caller, so maybe we don't.
Never mind. I withdraw my motion.
Okay. Continue on.
Okay. Can I finish my sentence?
Yes, please, Commissioner Fresco.
Oh yeah, so what I was going to say was I was doing some Googling around, and that parental concern is universal, and because of that, there have been a number of studies about the locations of medicinal cannabis stores that are governed under the kinds of regulations that we have here in this city and in this state, and they have absolutely no impact on middle school and high school drug use. So that they determined that under the current regulatory climate, it's not a problem. So I just wanted to, there was one study I read by the NIH that felt very official and convincing.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Do we have a motion?
Yes. I move approval of conditional use permit number 21 ENT-0197 for the property at 1416 Wilshire Boulevard. And then we add a condition to the STOA encouraging the applicant to reach out to parents at Lincoln Middle School and see if that somehow they can reach comfort in terms of the facility and the school. And I'm not sure how to phrase that exactly, but you know what I mean.
Okay, do we have a second?
I would second it if we add a condition that the plate glass window has to be transparent into the waiting room.
Is that friendly to the maker?
Yes.
And we did clear that with the applicant, right? Because I know there are like very specific rules about how, okay.
Right.
So because this is, Commissioner Reese, just give me a minute. Because we're modifying the STOA, we're going to need to take two different votes. So the first motion should be to approve the CUP, and then the second motion will be on the STOA. Commissioner Reese.
Okay.
Is it friendly if we make the hours consistent with the other ones, which was a 1 hour change? The applicant seemed to be fine with it, but I think we have to include that in our motion.
Is that an hour later or an hour earlier?
Earlier on Sunday.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so you want to make the motion again, do the first motion, which is to approve.
Mm-hmm.
Do we make a separate motion on the STOA, or is that included in this?
No, it
No,
has to be
we need to
separate.
do two separate motions.
Okay, so
So the first motion is simply to approve the CUP.
okay, but we haven't voted on that. Does that matter?
No, we have not voted.
Okay, then I would move also. Can we have two motions on the floor? I know. I would move that we
clarify your motion.
Okay, my first motion is to approve the conditional use permit number 21 ENT-0197 at 1416 Wilshire. Period.
Point of clarification.
Yeah.
The STOA is a record of the permit, so the motion has to include the hour change and the school thing and the transparent window.
Okay, so
your motion is to approve the permit with those three things. Yeah, okay.
So I would include those three items as an amendment to the STOA to the conditions for the project. That being the clear window, the relationship with the school, reaching out to the school. What was the third one?
The hour, the change in the hour.
Hours, to reduce the hours on Sunday by 1 hour.
And Nina, do you second that? That's a yes for the record. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Wait, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I haven't taken a position, and I would like to because I'm going to be voting against the motion. And I am voting against the motion without prejudice to the applicant. I think it looks like a great project, and I agree with Commissioner Fresco that this is unlikely to have any impact on Lincoln Middle School. I can't make the findings with respect to neighborhood compatibility in the absence of some time at least having passed in terms of putting both of the two permitted dispensaries in the same neighborhood. We did that maybe 6 weeks ago. If some time had passed and efforts had been made to locate it in the other areas of the city, I would be weighing neighborhood compatibility against the ability of somebody to use a permit that they won. But in the absence of that, and with no prejudice to the applicant, who did a really good job and has been very responsive, I am just not comfortable with loading up one part of town with both dispensaries for a wide variety of reasons. And so I will not be able to support the CV.
Can I say something? Even given its proximity to most of the doctor's offices in Santa Monica?
There are doctor's offices all over Santa Monica, and there are plenty of people who make use of medicinal cannabis who do not go from the hospital to the cannabis store and want to go from where they live. So I agree with you. I mean, I understand the value of the proximity, but this feels rushed to me, and I'm just naming that. I support the applicant. I want the applicant to succeed.
Okay, we got it.
Let's thank you.
And
Commissioner Fondo-Bernardi.
I would like to respond to that. I see where Commissioner Landers is going, but unfortunately at this point, it's not that it's too early or too close, these two particular applicants. It's that we didn't tell them they had to be far apart. We didn't say that they have to be evenly distributed. So in some ways, it's almost like an ambush. You get all the way to the finish line, and then someone says, oh, the goalposts are over here. And so I think it has good intentions, but if we went down that road, we're too late. And so with all due respect, I'm going to vote for it.
That's a fair point. But
Any other commissioners want to express their opinions before we vote? Okay, let's vote.
Commissioner Fondo-Bernardi?
Yes.
Commissioner Fresco?
Yes.
Commissioner Lambert?
Yes.
Commissioner Landris?
Taking Mario's point, I'll abstain rather than vote against it, but I can't get there, so I'll abstain.
Commissioner Raskin?
Yes.
Commissioner Reese?
Yes.
And Chair Pastor?
Yes. Okay, can I get a motion on the STOA, please?
Chair, may we actually display the STOA just per our practice so that you see the precise language before you vote?
Yeah,
Tony,
that'd
can
be
you
great.
go ahead and put that on the screen?
Sure. Can
So
everyone
you
see
can
that?
Yeah. Can you zoom in a little bit more? Just it's a little small.
Yeah, it's very small.
Go on. Here you go. So you can see there modified condition number 1 has the closing 1 hour earlier on Sundays. And then new condition 15 reads, prior to commencement of operations, the applicant shall make good faith efforts to coordinate with Lincoln Middle School to provide education regarding the facility and address concerns and questions of the parent community. And then new condition number 16 reads, prior to the issuance of a building permit, the applicant shall ensure that the storefront glazing be transparent into the waiting lobby area to the extent allowable by state law.
Excellent. You guys are really good.
Yeah. And James, we really appreciate you referring back to state law to make sure there's no.
I'm sorry, can I ask just a quick question? I apologize. I'll be voting for the STOA since it was approved, but is there a reason that the commission opted to limit its outreach to the parents of Lincoln as opposed to, for example, the counselors at Lincoln who have specific substance abuse education expertise and might also have thoughts? I just didn't really register that. I understood that it was outreach to Lincoln.
Fine.
We can change that to questions of the Lincoln Middle School community.
That would be better, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Fresco, second.
Okay. Commissioner
Yes.
Commissioner Landris,
Yes.
Commissioner Raskin,
Yes.
Commissioner Reese,
Yes.
Chair Pastor.
Yes. Thank you. So let's go ahead and move on to item 6B, which is 1674 20th Street. This is the development review permit and vesting tentative parcel maps to a tier 2, 51,000 square foot public storage facility with 3 levels above ground, 2 subterranean levels, 13 covered parking spaces are provided at grade. Let's see, who do we have? Oh, yes, Ms. Rake.
Hi, good evening, Commission. Stephanie Wright, Design and Historic Preservation Planner. I'm here for James Combs, who has done really great work on this project and is not here tonight because he and his wife...
I'm sorry, Stephanie. We haven't done ex partes, and I have some disclosures.
Oh.
I'm sure other people do as well.
Thank you very
Jim?
much.
You're asking me?
Yeah, because you're chair right now.
Oh, I'm sorry. I did not notice that. Okay, can I have ex partes then? Sean, go ahead.
Sure. Okay, so I exchanged emails, scheduling emails with Mr. Kozel on December 30th at 11 a.m. We had a Zoom meeting with Mr. Kozel, with Mr. Falonis and Mr. Gonzalez and Mr. Borden from the applicant. I also had an exchange of emails with Mr. Kozel on January 4th, in which I asked him whether he was planning to respond to the public comment letter we received from SHAPCO, and he wrote back to me indicating that he was, in fact, planning to do so, and he did.
Thank you for that, Commissioner Landris. I apologize. So I did not follow the instructions. First, I'm supposed to say that the caller queue is open, and staff will share the phone number on the screen. And anybody wishing to provide oral public comment on this item may call now. Once you're in the queue, you will hear the meeting over the phone. When it is time for public comment and it's your turn to speak, you will be notified that you are being unmuted by the moderator. All right, everyone. Okay, let's finish ex parte disclosures. Commissioner Lambert.
I had many email back and forth today with Kevin Kozel, and most of it revolved around the IZO and its inapplicability to this project. And Michael Falonis called me, and I'm sorry I didn't get back. And I know the site, and I am really going to miss that hot pink building.
Commissioner Fresco, and then Commissioner Raskin.
I will also miss the pink building. But Kevin Kozel contacted me at some point, and it took me until today to get back to him. By then, Michael Falonis had left me a message, and so I spoke with him. I asked him, our conversation was limited to the answer to the question, why does the ARB think a warehouse building that looks like a warehouse is a good idea? And we discussed that, and that was pretty much it.
Okay, Commissioner Raskin.
Yeah, yesterday I exchanged emails with Mr. He asked if I had any questions, and I said I didn't. And I regularly walk by the site.
I'm sorry, you exchanged emails with who? You cut out there first.
Oh, sorry, Kevin Kozel.
I also exchanged emails with Mr. Kozel yesterday. We exchanged emails about scheduling a time to talk. We spoke yesterday at 5:30 p.m. At that time, I spoke with he and Mr. Nolan Borden and somebody from Michael Falonis' office. And I apologize, I don't remember that person's name. And we went through the letter that was submitted by the neighbor and talked about a response, their response to each of the points in that letter. We also talked about the design. Commissioner Reese.
I think it was on 12/21. I had a Zoom call with Kozel, Mr. Falonis, and a representative of the applicant team, where they just had the opportunity to show me the project and talk a little bit about the use and the design.
Okay, now we can move to the staff. Thank you for your patience, Steph.
Oh, thank you very much. I'll go ahead and share my screen. And you can see my screen, I think. Yes?
Yeah, we see it.
We can.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for the time to present the project. I also wanted to acknowledge James Combs, who did the work on the project. I'm presenting in his stead because he and his wife are caring for their week-old baby. She's healthy and they're all healthy, and I'm very happy to report that good news on this 5th of January. So this is a storage facility proposal at 1674 20th Street, a development review permit and vesting tentative parcel map. Our recommended action is to approve both the development review permit and the parcel map and adopt the statement of official action. And as you know where the site is, it's on the northwest corner of 20th and Olympic. It's in the industrial conservation zone. It's a 15,200 square foot parcel. I think you all know the hot pink building that was previously occupied by Lorna Jane. I only regret that I didn't go to the warehouse sale. And it's in front of you as a development review permit because projects in the zone greater than 15,000 square feet require one. So this has gone to preliminary review to the Architectural Review Board in September. As much work as we had done with this wonderful applicant team to activate the corner, the previous design was roundly criticized by the Architectural Review Board, and Michael Falonis, as you know, is now the architect and has done what we think is a much improved design. It hasn't gone yet to the ARB, but in understanding their comments and talking with Mr. Falonis about the design, we think this new design has addressed the comments received by the ARB. It's a Tier 2 project, 3 stories, 42.6 inches high. Some of these facts are slightly different than in the report. There was some conflicting information that we received, and so this is the correct information. The above grade floor area is 26,492 square feet. There's storage in the basement, which is a good place for those storage units, and so the total floor area, 49,842 square feet. So the parcel map will merge the two adjacent lots. The lots are already tied together by the existing building, so that's not included as a condition of approval. And so I don't want to talk much about the design, but I do want to point out that there has been much effort to make this storage facility as pedestrian oriented as possible. The office area has been moved to the corner. There's as much transparency as there can be, setbacks that are not required for visibility to the alley and for landscaping in front of the building and an open space along Lincoln Boulevard that will also be landscape has been provided. And so we think that this will be a positive change, certainly to the previous design and to the existing condition. And then we received a letter, as you've seen, from the adjacent neighbor to the north, asking about circulation primarily and other issues. So I wanted to spend a moment going over the circulation Peter from Mobility is also here to answer any questions you may have at the end of my presentation. So the entry is off of Olympic Boulevard. There is a median on Olympic Boulevard, and most of the customer traffic will go in and out through that driveway. There has been a site distance analysis so that cars can exit safely onto Olympic Boulevard from that location. Trucks will move through the building and exit through the alley, but we don't anticipate that much traffic, additional traffic through the alley. As I mentioned, the visibility at the alley is improved because of the setback at the corner. And there was also concern in the letter you received about the dead-end conditions serving the trash. Wanted to mention that there are many dead-end conditions that our staff are very, very carefully navigate those conditions without incident. And so there are community benefits. In the staff report, there would be a minor correction to the commercial linkage fee program based on existing square footage. These are the additional fees that would be paid as part of the community benefits, and the transfer TDM plan has an AVR of 2.0. I wanted to emphasize that personal storage is a permitted use in the IC zone, and that residential development is prohibited in this zone, excepting specialized residential uses. And so, as you know, you read the staff report, it's consistent with CEQA guidelines for the exemption, the Class 32 exemption, consistent with the general plan, consistent with all standards, no impacts, and the existing building is not a historic resource. We've identified that it meets all zoning standards. And that then Mr. Kozel has very carefully gone through the conditions and thankfully pointed out that condition number 85 does not apply, and there are also some other standard conditions that do apply. This one will be deleted from the statement of official action. And that concludes my staff report with a recommendation to approve this permitted use at this site. Thank you very much for your attention. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Stephanie. If you'll hold on, I'm sure there are commissioner questions, Commissioner Lambert, and then Commissioner Lambert.
Stephanie, thank you for your presentation. Isn't it true that the IZO adopted last year, which basically says housing shall happen in IC and not commercial, does not apply actually to steps properties that are within 500 feet of the freeway?
That's right.
It's page 10 of the IZO, and this is within 500 feet of the freeway, correct?
That's right. Thank you for mentioning that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Landris?
Yeah, just for clarification, thank you for that report, Stephanie. My understanding is that when we were discussing those very IZOs, and it was last year during the housing element process, I believe that we heard from a representative of Harding-Larmor expressing concern about a prospective project that was right on the corner of Olympic that was within whether or not it was going to be within the IZO. This is the project that they had in mind. Is that correct?
Since there's a representative from that firm, you could ask them, but I anticipate that's correct, yes.
Okay, thank you. And just for the record, although I don't see it as a historic resource necessarily, I do want to point out that pink exists nowhere else in the city of Santa Monica, and so while I will also miss it, it has had its history that we should celebrate.
Well, I'm not sure it's in Mr. Falonis's wheelhouse, but I'm sure he's listening, so he will likely take that under advisement.
We'll discuss a prospective condition.
Okay, let's move, unless there's any other questions to staff. Thank you for that presentation. Let's move on. Who's making the presentation? Is that Mr. Falonis or Mr. Kozel or someone else?
Actually, I'll start, and then we'll all defer to Mr. Falonis.
Okay.
Good
You
evening.
have 15 minutes, but you
Thank
don't
you.
have to take them all.
Correct. Good evening. Thank you. Kevin Kozel, 1250 6th Street, Santa Monica. I'm speaking tonight on behalf of the applicant, Baranoff Holdings. I'm just going to take a moment to kind of provide some background and context, and then I'll turn the presentation over to the architect, Michael Falonis, and Nolan Borden from Baranoff, who can address some operational and security issues. First, I want to thank staff for their work on this project and the presentation tonight. We are in full support of the staff recommendation for approval, and we have no requested changes to any of the conditions as presented by staff, with including the elimination of condition number 85. I want to reiterate, as staff has said, self-storage is a permitted use in this district. No conditional use permit is required. The project is before you simply because it exceeds the development review permit threshold and is a Tier 2 project. As the staff report confirms, this is a fully code-compliant project that meets all zoning ordinance development standards and land use regulations, and it advances loose goals for the Industrial Conservation District. All necessary findings for the development review permit and parcel map can be made. We urge you to adopt staff's recommendation and approve the project and parcel map. I just want to briefly address, I know that Commissioner Reese presented some information online about other self-storage projects that are incorporating housing. We appreciate that creative thinking, and Nolan can explain that Baranoff has looked at that at other locations, but such mixed-use projects simply don't work at this very small location. A much larger site is needed to do that. And as staff has indicated, in fact, housing is prohibited in the IC district. So just to reiterate, self-storage is a permitted use at this location, and therefore the ideas about alternative uses or mixed uses are really not up before the commission tonight. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Falonis to really go into the building design. Thank you.
We're trying to get our presentation up on the screen. When it's up, please let me know that you can see it.
We can see it. Thank you.
Okay, great. Terrific. Good evening, Chair, Planning Commissioners. I'm Michael Falonis, the architect for this project. First, I'd like to thank Stephanie Wright and James Combs for a very thorough, thoughtful, and complete staff report. I'd like to briefly walk you through the design and then talk about some issues and some ideas that and basically the responses to the ARB's initial discussion when it came before them on a discussion item. So this is obviously the corner of the building, looking up 20th Street, looking north. Here we are in context, a contextual site plan. So there's a drive. Let me go to the next one because it's easier. The 20th Street down here at the bottom. I'm sorry, 20th Street north and south here, and Olympic Boulevard at the bottom. The entry in and out into the project is here. There's a sliding gate right along here, if you can see that. You can see my cursor moving. Anyone?
Yes, we can see that. Yes. Okay,
good. That sliding gate will slide into this pocket and be completely out of the way during normal business hours. And you'll see an image of the design of that sliding gate. There is another fence that runs here that is the same material, same design as the gate that slides. And then the transparency on this project on the corner starts right here at this corner, comes down. The main pedestrian entry is located here, comes down turns the corner, goes up 20th Street, and stops here. So there's a break room here, a toilet area for the employees. Trash is off the alley here, fire exit here, fire exit here, and this gate will open when people are exiting, vehiculars or trucks or whatever. There is another gate here that will also remain. I believe it remains closed during business hours and then is activated so people can come in here, park, load, unload their various items. Here along the street edge, we have a landscaped area here, and we have a small landscaped area that runs the length of the building here. In addition, we have a 3-tiered landscaped area, which is the lower landscaped area here, one that steps up a little bit higher, and another one that steps up a little bit higher here. The short-term bicycle parking is located here. And then there's 5 concrete 18 by 18 by 18 inch areas for people to sit, whether they're waiting for somebody that's in getting some things out of the storage, or it could even be a pedestrian passing by. So let me see. Let me go back. Oops, sorry. The area brief first reviewed the design on September 20th, 2021 as a preliminary review, as I mentioned earlier. I'd like to focus this presentation on ARB's comments, which are in your staff report. The corner site deserves an interesting, simple, and timeless building design. The building massing is a straightforward 3-story scheme. The first floor along Olympic is set back from the property line by 3 feet and 2.5 feet along 20th Street. The second and third floors on Olympic and 20th Street are set back an additional 5 feet from the facade of the ground floor. This made for a logical datum to change the material palette from smooth steel trowel acrylic stucco to the white corrugated metal siding on the second and third floors. We felt it was important to develop a design that had as much transparency as possible and make for a pleasant ground floor experience for pedestrians as well as people passing by and automobiles. We positioned the office and the pedestrian entry to the 20th Street and Olympic corner. This resulted in a design response which allowed for a more porous ground floor facade both on 20th and particularly on Olympic. So this whole facade here, all of this is transparent. As I mentioned earlier, this is the only glazed part, and this is then basically has a designed gate and fence. So but it's porous, it's open, you can see through it. Traditionally, the integration of bicycle parking, public seating for tenants and staff, and to incorporate a much needed landscaped area along Olympic makes for an unexpected visual in a predominantly industrial area of our city. Traditionally, self-storage facilities are void of windows in the storage areas. It was decided during the early design process a good way to help alleviate the blank wall on the upper 2 stories on Olympic was to introduce windows on those elevations. This was a bit problematic as storage lockers are typically located for efficiency along the exterior walls. We reconfigured the second and third floors to accommodate windows on the Olympic exterior elevation. The decision to include windows on the 20th Street elevation was made after our Architectural Planning Commission submission was delivered to James Combs. So here you can see we've highlighted the areas. These are the window locations along Olympic, and these are the window locations proposed window locations along 20th Street. We obviously, if once we do this walkway here will shift over and then back onto this walkway corridor space here. After our Planning Commission submission, we continue to develop the two elevations. The windows on Olympic have become much larger than what you have before you this evening, and the addition of windows on 20th Street are meant to be complementary, yet have a subtle difference to the Olympic elevation. The larger clear glass window configuration on Olympic, coupled with the added windows on 20th Street, has made for a hybrid building design that we feel is unlike a typical self-storage building. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have or comments at this time.
Thank you, Michael. Commissioner Fresco.
Do you have any more renderings of elevations, maybe?
We do. Let me walk you through a couple. This is the 20th Street elevation, which is now has been changed. It's, you know, I'm going through the submission, obviously, that we made for the Planning Commission for you folks this evening.
But none of them have the new windows.
How's that?
Oh, yeah, that's a whole different deal.
Yes. So we have added some very large windows. We've increased the size of the windows on Olympic, the lower one. We've shifted them slightly so that they're not lined up. And compositionally, we felt that it made more sense to do this. And then the ones on the windows on the 20th Street side are the lower windows are very large. The upper windows are also quite large. And then they're framed. They're framed with a steel frame that goes around them. The windows up above on the Olympic side, the glazing is pulled out to the edge of that frame. All the rest of them have been pushed back at the edge of the wall.
Thank you.
Other commissioners? Commissioner Reese?
Actually, Chair Pastor, could I ask a quick question?
I guess.
Yeah, just because I think we were still within our 15-minute presentation, and I wanted to make sure that the clock had stopped. Nolan had a few comments he wanted to make, but I don't want to.
I'm sorry. I apologize, Kevin.
No.
I thought that was the end. Okay.
Yeah, no, I don't want to interrupt if commissioners want to ask Mike. Sure, we get a couple minutes for Nolan to speak.
Yeah, Melissa, go ahead and stop the clock. Any other questions? Do that, and then Nolan can finish up.
Okay, they have 4 minutes left on the clock, so go ahead, Nolan.
Well, wait, hold on a second. Jim, are your questions for Mr. Pelota?
They are, actually.
Okay, so you know what, actually, I take that back. Let's let Nolan finish the presentation, and then we can ask questions to everyone all together. Okay, so Nolan, why don't you go ahead and finish up?
Perfect. Thank you,
Michael,
commissioners.
hang on.
Yeah, thank you, commissioners, for your time tonight, and thank you, planning staff, for the presentation. Really appreciate it. Really quickly, I just wanted to first address the letter that we received from our neighbor. He had some very valid comments, so we just want to give that a little bit of attention. The first comment was related to signage being installed at the 19th Court Alley to make sure that the storage customers don't enter the alley. We have no problem putting code compliant signage at the entrance to the alley to make sure that our customers are not pulling into the alley because there is no entrance for them there. We also have no issue putting code compliant signage at the entrance to our parking area along Olympic to make sure that customers understand where they need to enter the facility. The next comment is related to trash, and I believe that Stephanie addressed that earlier about the trash trucks pulling in and out of the alley, so I'm going to skip over that one. The next comment is related to 19th Court again, and making sure that storage customers don't park their vehicles in there. We have no issue putting no parking signs in the alley along our building to make sure people don't park there. And in addition, we will have cameras on inside and outside the facility and in 19th Court. Those cameras feed directly into the leasing office. And so management will be able to see if anybody parks back in the alley, and they can quickly go back there and make sure that they move their car. The next section of questions are talking about the property line abutment on the north side of the property. There is a 26-inch buffer zone in between our building wall and the property line, and the neighbor was concerned that there's going to be vegetation growth that's undesirable there. The 26-inch buffer zone is all concrete and it's drained, so there can't be any wild vegetation growth there, so no issue there. Another issue was garbage accumulating in the buffer zone, especially on the west side over by the alley. We're going to have enough space, and we have a fence over on the west side where we can clean up trash if trash does get dumped there. So again, non-issue. We want to make sure that we're a good neighbor and that we're running a clean facility, so we're going to make sure that it's clean. The next one is about fire emergency vehicles needing to access his property in order to fight a fire on ours. All points of our project, or all points of our building, are within 150 feet of the street, which is the radius that the fire trucks need. And so no issue with needing fire trucks to access his property in order to defend a fire on our site. There was a comment about subterranean shoring. We're going to use a soldier pile system. It will be entirely on our property. There will be no tiebacks that cross the property line. So no issue there. That'll go through the building permit process, obviously. Next comment was about the protection of the existing trees on his site. He has really nice landscaping on the south side of his site, and we will do everything in our power to protect his landscaping and his trees during construction. And if anything happens to his trees, if a tree or if trees die during the construction process, we'll make sure we make it right and we replace those trees. There is one other question that's really related to security. He's concerned that individuals are going to be able to access our facility after hours, use the bathroom facilities, use the shower facilities, and it's going to attract more people to break into our facility. I can tell you that we have the gates around the parking area that make the facility very secure. We have a locked door that leads from the parking area into the elevator lobby, another locked door that leads into the first floor storage area, and another locked door that locks the bathroom and the shower area. So essentially there are 4 locked doors. Crossing through any of the locked doors, that's off the alarm. So really not an issue, not something that's going to happen. And we do put really heavy duty doors at the exterior walls of our building.
Thank you. That's time.
Yeah, and so do I have any more time?
No, I think that's the end.
Okay, you're good. No problem. Thank you.
You'll have a few minutes for a rebuttal if there's anything else. Okay, let's go ahead and go back to Commissioner questions. So Commissioner Reese was next in line, and then Commissioner Landreth.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you to the project team and to staff for their presentation. Just to clarify, the information I sent out today was mainly to show the different designs that happen with self-storage, the different materials that can be used, and the different articulation. I will highlight one project had residential, the other project had loft, artist studios, not residential, but actual workspaces. So there's a variety of uses that could be incorporated with this as well. But for Michael, my first question for you is, along the 20th Street frontage, there is a pretty long blank wall. And I'd like to ask you, what % of that wall is that blank wall versus the transparency that looks in into the break room and to the lobby?
I think it's probably about that if you divided that elevation into thirds, a third of it is glazed and 2/3 of it is a blank wall. The thought is that some of this landscaping is going to start, hopefully, will start to become more mature over a period of time and be able to grow up that wall a bit. We have a fight. You can see at the back end of that car, there's an indent in the wall for the fire stair door to lead out onto the sidewalk.
I think I would comment that that's a very.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It's not really a requirement for you guys, but it's a very narrow sidewalk along 20th Street, and as somebody who walks there on a daily basis, that's much more impacted by traffic than by cars. Would there be any? And I don't like the facade as it is along there, but I'm just thinking that a wider sidewalk is probably better than some low scale shrubs along that area. Has there been any thought about widening the sidewalk from your team?
No, what we did was the reason we got landscape there is because at night we can light that wall and bring a little life to that side of the building during evening hours and very, very early morning hours. The truth is, if you compare this to what you've got there now, it's a colossal improvement, particularly along Olympic. And yes, I think it's proportionally, the scale is right. We really feel that this building is proportionately, the composition of the windows and the solid versus the open walls is a nice kind of balance in the building design.
Okay. Another question I have for you is, why is there? I mean, there's kind of a carve out on it. The upper stories in my mind, lack some articulation. But it's interesting on the back side of the building where we can't see it, the building is stepped back. Is there any reason that area that the street frontages didn't have as much articulation as the back portion? Let's say it would be the northwest corner of the site has a bigger carve out on the upper stories.
Yeah, that's just a function of being able to put some parking in a parking lot, not cover with a building, because then it counts against our FAR. Parking that's covered counts against our FAR. So to be able to compress this building into a piece that doesn't jeopardize the FAR on this building, that's the kind of solution that we arrived at.
Okay. And then the applicant just referenced that if one of the trees on the north side of the property happened to perish during construction, it would be replaced. What do you suppose would be the biggest size tree you could replace it with? I assume it wouldn't be completely like for like, since those have been there for so long.
Yeah, I don't know what the species of that tree is, but they're not very big. So the ball, the root ball is probably fairly modest in size. I don't know, maybe it's a 24-inch box. I don't know. It's probably not bigger than that.
Well, I would urge you, if you had to do a replacement, to at least look for a 36-inch box or something, because those have been around for a long time. They're trimmed pretty closely. But anyways, the next questions I would have, I think, probably go to Mr. Kozel. So I thank you, Michael, for your responses.
Sure, you bet. Thank you.
Oh, actually, Michael, I'm sorry. I need to ask you one other question.
Okay.
In the findings, when we're looking at the general plan, there is something in the general plan that talks about, I think it's policy LU 15.1, that projects along corridors need to have distinctive architecture. Can you just outline for me again how we're meeting that with this finding? I mean, based on that concept that there has to be distinctive architecture.
Yeah, I think it really depends on how you define distinctive architecture, and I think it's a very, very, very subjective position to take. I, frankly, from my perspective, this doesn't look like a self-storage building to me. And I think based on that, I think it's very distinctive. When we design buildings, we try to design buildings not copying other buildings, not using things that the other buildings have used, except if it's, maybe a glazed wall or something like that. So we really spent a lot of time looking at the window designs for both these elevations on the second and third floor. We thought making them unique, different, other than probably not what you've seen before, makes them unique. The other thing that we look to try to strive to do, and I think we accomplished that, is to develop timeless designs. So whether this building was built 25 years ago or in 25 years, I think it will remain timeless because you won't be able to date it. Unlike a lot of stylistic buildings that you say, oh yeah, that was done in the 50s, or that was done in the 60s, or that was done because it's trendy, it's stylish. This is not that kind of building.
And just on the whole issue of findings, there's also I think it's one of the findings that staff highlights showing consistency is like D27.10 in the industrial conservation policies, where it talks about a variety of heights and materials to create visual interest. And they highlight that sentence. So I'm interested in hearing more about the variety of heights, how we're doing that, and the variety, what the different materials are that you have, as well as the next sentence, which was not put in the staff report, which talks about building design should avoid uniformly flat roofs. So I'd like to hear a little bit about how we're...
I'm sorry, flat what?
Flat roofs.
Oh. If we go back to, let me see if I can go back to, whoops, going the wrong way. There. This building is, the building up above comes to here, and then it turns the corner here, comes around, goes here, and so now we're back to here again. If we moved this open space somewhere else, let's say we moved it back up here, we would have to cover the parking area because the city code says if you have parking that's covered, you count it against your FAR. So it kind of handcuffs us in some ways to be able to do something slightly different than and slightly different based on what you're talking about or what you're asking me. So it's us responding to the code in a positive way, not to lose FAR, which I hate to say it, but which we're entitled to, and the client would expect us to do a proper job in designing a building that maximizes the FAR on the site. So it's a catch-22. Do we try to convince the client to lose a bunch of FAR, or do we do what we feel is best? Now, the other thing that I got to remind you of is, we go back to this. The second and third floors are set back from the first floor by 5 feet. You can start to see it over there a little. You can't detect it here very well because of the angle of the rendering, but that whole second and third floor is set back from this facade here and this band and this facade by an additional 5 feet. All of this is set back from that by an additional 5 feet. There is some articulation in the upper levels, granite. I don't know if that answered your question, but.
And the only thing that you didn't touch on was, what are the different materials, please?
Oh, yes. This material here, down on the ground floor, is a white, smooth steel trowel acrylic stucco. This is a corrugated metal material that wraps all the way around the building. It's not just on these two elevations, but it's consistent all the way around the building. And it is white.
Okay, thank you. You've answered my questions. I do appreciate that, Michael.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, and I'll try to make my questions quickly. So for Mr. Kozel, I'm looking at in the loose, and I'm specifically concerned about finding D that we have to make about compatibility with the, or general consistency with the loose. And I look at the employment and commerce section of the loose and industrial conservation. It talks about in the very opening statement that this should be that we should provide a job base in this area. And then it goes on in another section of this where it talks about the strategic approach and the development of it should retain existing buildings and develop new buildings designed to facilitate incubator industries. So there's a very heavy focus on job creation in this area, which is really important to our economic base in the city. How are we promoting that with a self-storage facility?
Well, two things. I'll let Nolan's going to respond to that as well. But I don't believe that the loose policy requires that every site maximize the number of employees. A self-storage use is permitted in the industrial conservation zone. The zoning is consistent with the loose, and this also helps facilitate, as the staff report has indicated. Self-storage is a use that assists both businesses and residents. So we do think that would be consistent with that goal. And I think, Nolan, did you want to address this?
I was just going to expand on what Kevin just said about small businesses. So we see as many as 30% of our customer base as being small businesses, whether that's small businesses that people are running out of their homes, whether they have an office space, whether it's e-commerce, whatever it is. And so while the actual storage use itself is not a big employer, it is a support mechanism for other businesses, especially smaller startup businesses. The structure of self-storage leases, in that they are short-term and month-to-month, it enables small businesses to gather up more space as they're growing, or if they need to dial back operations, they can shed space. And it's a much better solution than going out and signing a 5-year lease for a lot of these small businesses, especially startup businesses. So again, while there's not a bunch of employees running around in the self-storage building itself, there are a lot of small businesses that are supported by the self-storage business.
So yeah, I saw that referenced in the staff report, but I'm just curious, did you guys provide is there any empirical data that backs that up other than the written statement in our staff report?
Yeah, there is. So we work with a handful of the large public self-storage REITs, and one of them that manages the majority of our facility is Extra Space Self-Storage. There's a couple of them in Santa Monica and several of them on the west side. They have over 1,800 facilities nationwide. They have a ton of data. They've been in the business for a really long time, and because we work with them, we've been working with them for over 5 years. They share a ton of their data with us. And so that 30% figure that I just mentioned, it came from Extra Space, that in infill locations like this, especially areas like the Bay Area, like Santa Monica, they see high numbers of small businesses coming in and renting space at facilities like this.
Okay, but just to be clear, that's not in the public record today.
Well, I think it is. We just testified to that. I think testimony counts as evidence into the record. And one point also, Jim, Commissioner Reese, I forgot to make was, the city does have a jobs housing imbalance, and so certainly the city is very interested in developing additional housing. This site is not appropriate for housing, we don't believe, and so I think you have to look at all the different policies throughout the loose And so we do actually think that having a use like this that assists local businesses and residents without making the jobs, housing balance worse is actually beneficial.
Okay. I'm not pushing, just to be clear, I'm not, in tonight's conversation, I have not raised the issue of housing on this. I've lost that vote before in terms of when you guys were defending this position with the ICO. But that's not my push tonight. My push is just to make sure we're meeting the economic goals of the loose and some of the design issues. So I'm going to stand down at this point, but I appreciate everybody's responses. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Landry?
I've appreciated this exchange. And I actually I'll start with a follow-up that Commissioner Reese's question. I was thinking about this with the ways that people are using their storage spaces, right? They're not always using them for storage. People are going and practicing instruments, and they're doing things. Are you permitted, and this may be a question for staff, let's say there is someone who's running a home-based business that is e-commerce, and they're using their storage to store goods that they're getting ready to ship. Are you permitted in the area? Could you then offer shipping services as part of your storage services? Is that allowed?
I think that's a question for staff.
Okay. Well, is that maybe I'll ask it this way to Mr. Borden. In your other locations, do you offer ancillary services to people who are using storage facilities for things like e-commerce?
No, we don't.
You don't. Okay. All right. So I guess I'll have more to say in discussion about the 20th Street elevation. I do like it a lot better, and my concern, well, I'll just say it now and not later in case Mr. Falonis wants to respond. It strikes me that the way you've designed the 20th Street elevation is more responsive to the apartments across the street that are above grade than it is responsive to pedestrian uses at grade. Thinking about Commissioner Reese's question about that long blank wall. Is that a fair statement? You're muted.
My recollection is either there's no windows on the first floor of the building across the street from us, or they're up so high, all they're doing is getting light into the building.
That's my impression as well. Yeah. Okay. And then this is a question for Mr. Kozel. I think you made a number of offers in your response letter to the Shapko comment. As a practical matter, how would you propose that those be memorialized in the STOA? Should they be added as voluntary statements to the project description? So the applicant will install code compliant signage in the alley right-of-way and in the other location that you mentioned, or should they be included as conditions?
I think those are conditions.
We're going to do those as conditions. That's fine. Is that acceptable to the applicant?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Okay. That's great. All right. Those are my questions. Thank you very much.
Okay. Anyone else? Commissioner Fonda-Bernardi.
Yeah, I thought this was a very interesting discussion. We were skating, actually, at least with Commissioner Reese's comments, actually into our ARB land. And one thing that struck me about this building is that it doesn't look like a storage building. In fact, if you took away the word self-storage, you would know what this building was, and that's its intrigue. It could be a laboratory, it could be a sound studio, who knows what it is. It could be an office building for that matter. And so it really has escaped the bounds of sort of self-storage, and besides, it's not orange, and it's not raspberry either, like the existing building, but not sort of the traditional public storage kind of model. I also think it does speak very well to the building across the street, which has corrugated metal on it. And actually, interestingly enough, there's a tiny little architect's office on the other corner, which I think it also fits nicely as sort of a flat, long, thin object. I think it's very successful aesthetically. I have my usual question, which is, there is a barren roof there begging for solar collectors. And so the question is, the solar collectors that you have, what percent of their load do you think you're going to have in that building? Can those meet? And can we do better up there?
Answer that, Commissioner. We have engaged Mr. Zinner's organization to take a look at what would we need to get this building to be net zero. We can't get there because we don't have enough roof to do it. The loads are very, very, very minimal. You can imagine, with nobody there, maybe from day to day,
Right.
except a couple of people in the office, the mechanical loads are nothing, very well insulated. But I think we're going to be able to perform pretty well with the solar collectors. And that's our kind of next step, is to get into that level of detail, because we've got a lot of flat roof. We've got a elevator. What do they call it? We've got an elevator shaft that comes up above the level of the roof by, I think, about 4 or 5 feet. But the parapet walls here screen it, so you won't be able to see it. But that's just about all we've really got on the roof. So we're looking at some options there. I know we can't get to net zero. That's already been determined. But I think we can do pretty well to maximize the energy for this building. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is Nolan. I just want to jump in really quick. I know that we can beat the Santa Monica minimum requirements for solar on the roof based on the limited amount of research that we've done. And ultimately, what we're looking to do is max out the footprint on the roof and put as much solar as we can. We know that we're not going to get to a net zero building, but we think it'll go a long way and maybe get us to 50% of the building usage.
Well, that would be a big improvement. And as far down that road as you can go, the universe thanks you, because we are in desperate straits, as you well know. And then the last question, this is maybe a question about formatting. I really like the exchange between the neighbor to the north and Mr. Kozel's response. And is there a way to just add that as part of the documentation of the project conditions, as opposed to itemizing each one and having to go through the text of each one? So this is a question for the staff and/or the city attorney. So anyway, that's the end of my questions.
Thank you. Heidi, do you want to jump in on that?
This is Jing. I think that we would need to either incorporate things that are appropriate as conditions of approval, or include things that are not appropriate as conditions, as the applicant voluntarily including in the project description. Attaching the letter wholesale is not an appropriate way to do that. It may be helpful if the commission wanted to identify what conditions you want to add.
So also to amplify what Jing is saying, I've been going through the letter. It's actually fairly straightforward, and I'm crafting conditions based on the letter, and I can share my screen at the appropriate time, and Mr. Kozel can let me know if there's anything that I've missed.
Thank you, Stephanie. Okay, is there anything else from the commission? Questions? Okay. So the caller queue is now open for this item. As you know, let's go ahead and do public comment. Melissa, how many callers do we have?
So far, we just have one, and I'm going to go ahead and take them off mute. Hello to our callers. Thanks for your patience. You are now live in the meeting. Please state your name for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
My name is Jaime Gesundheit, 1666 20th Street. We came to Santa Monica and built our facility 36 years ago. We have been pretty good residents and respectful neighbors. We have watched all the development around us. We are real estate developers, and we currently operate in 8 different states with a variety of different products. I've listened carefully at the comments this evening, and I am absolutely flabbergasted as an architect and as a real estate developer that everybody talked about all the great things that this building is doing for the neighbors across the street and for the little building on the other side of Olympic, but forgot to mention the fact that we are going to live with a building 26 inches away from the property line that's a solid wall 42.5 feet tall. And there is nothing that I can develop that will screen the impact of having a wall 26 inches away, not on the property line or not 5 feet away, which would allow for some landscaping to go in, but 26 inches away that has absolutely nothing, no fenestration, no articulation, no 5-foot setbacks, nothing. Just metal structure, 42.5 feet tall, blocking the sunshine from our building. You got to be respectful. You pride yourselves in having a great community that really follows the rules. This project is not following the rules. I articulated in my letter concerns. You can post all the signs you want in the alley. We don't call it 19th Court. It's an alley. You can talk to the PD. You can talk to code enforcement about the problems in that alley. I requested some kind of a study to determine what size vehicles can enter and exit this facility you're proposing, because that alley is very narrow. And we've lived with it for 36 years, and we've experienced the blockage that occurs by pickup trucks. Forget trailers, pickup trucks. And I think somebody's got to go and look at it. Somebody's got to go visit with the folks that live there permanently. Somebody's got to look at the fact that all the neighbors on the west side of the alley use the alley for their trash cans, thus taking part of the alley away. And by the way, we are the only property that uses the alley for ingress and egress. So the rest of the property owners have no access to that alley. So we're the only ones.
That has been your 3 minutes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hold on in case people have questions for you. Does anyone have questions? I've got some questions.
I do.
Sean.
I do. Thank you. Thank you for your call, and thank you for your concern. I understand where you're coming from. However, I'm looking at your map. I'm looking at the map. I'm looking at the neighborhood. I drive there frequently. When you say that there's a 26-inch, distance from your property line, we're talking about 26 inches from your parking lot. Is that correct?
From our property line, yes.
From your property line, which is from your
That's right. That's the majority of our parking. Correct.
Okay, so I understand your concern about 42.5 feet of solid wall. I hear you, but I'm asking what impact, other than sunlight, will that have on your property?
Visually, when you're sitting in your office, you're going to be staring at a blank wall that you cannot screen. I have no way of screening that wall. Right now, I screened that wall because the current structure is on the property line, and we grew vines on that wall. We have a nice green wall to look at.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I guess my question is, so when you bought the property, was it industrial zoned or commercial zoned?
No, it was zoned for offices.
But for non-residential uses. And
yes.
And are you aware of what the permitted? You said you're a developer and you're very experienced. Are you aware of what you said that they're somehow violating the regulations? Is there a particular development standard
I never said that.
They're violating?
I never said that.
Okay, maybe
they're
I
not violating any
that was inconsistent with the rules.
No. I never said that.
Okay, so it's okay. Apologize. I must have misheard that. And okay, so you're alleging that the major impacts are essentially like you're concerned about the visual impacts with regards to the wall. Is that correct?
Well, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting in that in the presentation there are no drawings or renderings or even images of that side of the building.
Okay. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you so much for. And have you talked to the applicant at all?
The applicant reached out to me yesterday, and I was not in my office. Today, I sent him back an email acknowledging that I had received the letter sent by his attorneys, and I appreciated the fact that he looked at my letter and addressed some of the issues.
Okay.
But nobody's reached out to us during this entire process.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for sharing that.
No
okay,
problem.
Anybody else?
Thank you.
We do not have any other callers in the queue.
Okay, so do we want to do rebuttal?
Yes, can I just speak quickly?
Yeah.
And then Michael, if you want to add anything, and Nolan will as well. I just want to reiterate a couple of points. This is a permitted use in the IC zone, so really the use is not before you. It's not a conditional use permit before you. It's really just the building. It's a code compliant building. It meets all the zoning ordinance development standards in terms of height, setback, FAR, and this has been carefully reviewed by staff. Resource recovery and recycling has carefully looked at the trash enclosure, how that will work. Mobility has carefully looked at the entrances and exits, so we do think that it's been carefully studied. Michael, anything you want to add?
Well, the only thing that I would add is that should in the future the gentleman that spoke, he could actually build a building right almost up to ours, although we'd still have that 26-inch space between our building and his that could be blank. So, you can't always predict what's going to come down in the future. Buildings next to you and so forth, you hope for the best. And I think what we've done is a very good building. And I appreciate your comments, all of you, all of the commissioners. And I think we've addressed the concerns, certainly, that were in that letter.
Michael, I'm sorry if I missed this earlier, but did the GRB say anything about that wall that faces the gentleman's property who was just...
Not that I'm aware of. Mr. Kozel might be.
I can respond to that question.
Oh, that'd be great, Stephanie.
Yeah, what the ARB reviewed a preliminary design that was completely.
Oh, right. Okay.
So they will be reviewing the design if and after this is approved.
Thank you, Stephanie.
I have a follow-up. Yeah, I mean, it's ironic because Stephanie, you and I have had this conversation before about where you put murals, and why you use murals on blank walls. But we have a growing mural community. I don't know what the right word is, but we're doing more and more murals in Santa Monica, and they're beautiful. And Beautify Earth has led the charge, but there are others as well. And without putting it as a condition, because I still think you need to work things out, I would like to suggest to the applicant that maybe one thing to think about is that will be a big blank wall, very likely, which makes it a wonderful opportunity for a mural. And maybe you could work collaboratively with your neighbor to the north and your neighbors to the west to come up with a mural design that is meaningful for Santa Monica, but is also pleasant for them to look at every day. We can't do anything about the shade. It's an industrial zone. I get that, but maybe there's an opportunity there to make some art out of the new situation.
If I may, Commissioner Landris, when I discussed the design in a preliminary way with Mr. Falonis, which is what I typically do with all our applicants, my advice to him was really exactly opposite. So,
okay.
Because in my view, and I think the board agrees with this, that murals don't really belong on new buildings. The new building architecture should be sufficient without the mural.
Yeah, I hear you. I would say that that's not always possible. And this is an industrial zone. And so the flexibility that we would expect of an applicant in a different kind of zone with a much more pedestrian orientation might be different. I think why don't we, I could rephrase my suggestion to the applicant, and I would want to hear from the applicant. There's an opportunity to make the most of that wall artistically, however you choose to do it, but to not present the neighbors with a blank wall. But if you have to give them a blank wall, hey, it's an industrial zone. It kind of is what it kind of is.
Okay, I think we've moved away from questions at this point, so I want to go ahead and close the public hearing. And let's go into commissioner discussion and/or any motions, please. There have been a number of discussions about modified conditions. Applicants, yeah, you can take yourself off screen. Thank you. Who wants to start? I'll start actually. I haven't talked much tonight. I understand the consternation about this. It's not my most favorite building design in the world. It's not my most favorite use in the world. But this is a permitted use here. And we need these uses in our community. And when I talked to the applicant, we talked about that there's kind of a dearth of those things. And I would like to provide some direction to the DRB to try to articulate the building more. And I am worried about that facade, that the blank facade. I don't necessarily appreciate the way it was expressed to us, but I think that is a concern. But this is an industrial zone, right? This is not a housing zone. We're not having housing there. But these uses, let's let all uses in our community that are appropriate. And this is a permitted use. So I'm going to vote for this. I am disappointed that they hadn't reached out to the neighbor earlier. It's too bad the neighbor hadn't understood this was the proposal earlier, and so then there was not time for more discussion before just a couple of days ago. But I think that the applicant has suggested and has agreed to, and we've talked about some good conditions that will alleviate some of the concerns, and I would like to impose those. That's what I have to say. So who wants to go next? Commissioner Fresco.
I just wanted to respond to one of Jim's questions about our economic base and the value of having self-storage in a city where we are building hundreds and thousands of tiny little apartments where people really need this stuff in order to make their lives happen and also in order to benefit from those balconies we require on every single apartment, so those don't end up being storage. So, you know, I hate to always bring in the personal experience, but I have been a city dweller in a small apartment with my own business, and I kept my supplies for my business in my mini storage, and it made it possible for me to do all that without having to rent an office. So it's a really important thing, and we definitely need it. And now that it is not going to be a box on the corner, and it's going to have windows, and I have to say, having windows inside is really terrific to provide natural light into those corridors the way they were, at least back in my day. You walk in, it's dark, and as you approach your area, there's this like bang. Like in a prison, and the lights go on, and it's really scary. And I never went by myself. We did.
Nina, can we get a little bit more specific about the conditions that we've talked about? The ones I have on my list are the modification to Condition 85 that Stephanie mentioned, code compliant signage. Let's see, I've lost the.
I think Stephanie has a list she wants to show us.
Oh, yeah.
I think Stephanie's been working with the printed letter, and we can nail it down in our STOA in the next motion. Isn't that right?
Yes. So I can go ahead.
That's smart.
Yeah.
I can go ahead and share my screen, and then Mr. Cole. Just give me a moment. I'm formatting.
While she's doing that, I just want to note that a small little urban fact about this corner is it is actually an unofficial, not super legal with the parking authority pick up and drop off place for the school caddy corner to it. So the operators of this business might already know that, but around 3 o'clock, there's a lot of Lexus SUVs parked in front of there.
Wait, are you suggesting that parents place their children in self-storage on school night?
No, in Lorna Doone hot pink outfits on school night.
Oh, okay.
If you're ready, I'm sharing my screen, I think.
Yeah, can you blow it up a little, like in your Word document?
Yeah. Let's see.
Just zoom in. Yeah. Keep
yeah,
going.
there you go.
Get up to like 140% or something.
All the percents. There you go.
They're great. We can read the conditions.
Shall I read it? I can read it out. Prior to a C of O, the applicant shall install code-compliant directional signage subject to approval by the Mobility Division, including signage along the building at 19th Court Alley, indicating there is no ingress and only egress from 19th Court Alley. Prior to certificate of occupancy, the applicant shall install code-compliant directional signage subject to approval by the Mobility Division at the entrance to the parking area to appropriately direct customers. Prior to C of O, the applicant shall install no parking signs on the building along 19th Court Alley, subject to approval by the Mobility Division. Employees of the self-storage facility shall request that customers move the vehicle if cars are parked illegally on the alley. The applicant shall install and monitor security cameras in the project, including 19th Court Alley. The 26-inch wide area between the proposed building and north property line shall be concrete along the ground with appropriate drainage in order to prevent vegetation growth. As agreed to by the applicant, all shoring will be completed entirely within the project property lines via soldier pile shoring. Tiebacks across the property line shall not be permitted. Security gates shall be required on the Olympic and 19th Court Alley ingress and egress. Security gates shall be required on Olympic and 19th Court Alley ingress and egress. And there's one that I'm missing is photovoltaic will be maximized on the roof. Oh, can't require that. Sorry.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question?
I think, also, sorry if I may interrupt, this also includes the deletion of condition number 85 as well, as Stephanie had mentioned.
Correct.
Go ahead, Sean.
I just want to let Stephanie finish typing because I want to go back up a page. So the security gates, I think, is listed twice, but can we require the shoring to be completed that way, or does that need to be in the project description?
I'd like that to come out. I mean, I think you can say no tieback, but I think that you're asking for trouble by requiring shoring by soldier piles, because what if they get in there and something else happens?
Yeah, I'm not comfortable with that. I also want to go back one more bullet. So this is a tough one, and I want to acknowledge the sensitivity here. 26 inches is not a lot of space. However, as I have learned from watching homeless encampments on Centinela at the eastbound ramp to the 10 freeway eastbound, 26 inches is wide enough for people to store belongings and for people to actually sleep in a space. It's not good, and we should be housing everybody, but it's possible. We need to make sure, for everyone's sake, that 26-inch wide area is fully secured and cannot be so that if there are ever encampments in the alley, that people can't throw their stuff over the, yeah, exactly. So some version of that is legally compliant. You want to be able to get in there to clean it, but you also want it to stay closed with a high enough gate and that people can't get over it.
That's okay to secure that.
Yeah.
Commissioner Fondo Bernardi.
Yeah, we also had a voluntary tree replacement offer from the applicant. So that should be attached to this. If any trees are killed, they would be replaced.
So applicant shall replace any trees that are damaged or, I guess, killed. Shall replace any damaged or killed trees, during construction. And
I think we want to add to that a cap, just as a qualifier, that as agreed to by the applicant, because this is not, as you are aware, the city does not have a private tree ordinance. So it should be as agreed to by the applicant. The applicant shall replace any trees damaged during construction along the north property line.
That's great, thank you. Commissioner Raskin, do you want to specify the size of the trees?
Well, I just want to say as a point of information that the city has a legal framework for replacement of public trees if they're damaged during the construction process. So I don't know if this is a necessary condition. And forgive me, I'm looking back through the conditions that are already in there, but I thought that there was something similar to that already in the conditions.
For trees on private property, right? Remember, these are not public-facing trees. These are those ones that are between.
These are private trees that are on the north property line, shared with the adjacent. So they're on private property.
I see. Okay. All right. Fine.
Commissioner Fonda Bernardi.
Yeah, I'm looking at that concrete 26-inch space, and if there's going to be anything happening on that wall, whether that wall is left as is, or painted, or some sort of design put on it, or someone could grow a vine over it. There are vines that will grow 40 feet without a problem. Then that concrete there on that 26-inch might be adversarial. So if maybe should say concrete unless landscaped. Close comments, and then let it go at that, sort of free that up. The other thing I would like to point out is that, yes, this is a 42-inch change wall next to the neighbor, but that discussion we had earlier with Commissioner Reese about why is the corner of the building that's carved out actually hidden? It's behind the building. Well, it's actually, in a paradoxical way, very beneficial to the northern neighbor because about 70% of that wall is solid, but 30% of that wall is completely open, which will make his parking lot much more, let's say, bright and shiny and visible. It won't be in the shadow all the time. So there is some advantage to making the carve out on the back side of the building in this particular case.
I don't know that properly landscaped. Can you take out the word properly and just say unless landscaped? I'm just not sure what properly means.
Yes. How about intentionally landscaped? Because I think the drainage.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I think what we're hearing is we don't want. Yeah, intentionally lands.
Well, that's not.
Could it be landscaping approved by the ARB? Wouldn't the ARB be approving this landscaping?
Yes. Even better.
Yes, and can we move the parenthetical to just before with appropriate drainage? Because otherwise the sentence implies that the drainage is not necessary if it's landscaped. And I think we're saying the drainage has to be there no matter what.
Well, if we're saying that it should be either concrete or it should be landscaped, then we shouldn't say either. It should just have drainage and be fully secured.
The 26-inch wide area between the proposed building and the north property line shall have appropriate drainage and be fully secured and shall either be concrete along the ground or intentionally landscaped.
Is that sufficient?
No, keep going. And then after secured, and.
Oh, sorry.
And fine, that's good actually. And unless landscape is approved by the ARB, shall be concrete along the ground. That's good. That's.
Will the gate on 19th Court, will that always be closed except when people...
Kevin, can you turn off your camera and your microphone, please?
Yeah, there should be commas before unless and after ARB. Yep, there we go. Does that work?
Okay. Are there any other conditions that we need to add in? If not, let's finish discussion and vote. Commissioner Reese, do you have any that you are?
What makes you think I would have any comments? Yeah, I'm not going to vote for this.
Stop sharing my screen, please?
Yes, thank you, Stephanie.
I am not going to vote in favor of the project, which is pretty unusual for me. I don't see I can't make the findings. I don't see this being a distinctive architecture. While the argument was a good argument that the back created FAR, the reason they didn't do that is because there's power poles back there and they couldn't get the building back in that area. And so can't make the findings on this is not distinctive architecture. I don't see how this is really promoting our job base based on the information in the public record, as opposed to some testimony tonight. And I'm disappointed that, the Pico area is not seeing the kind of design that I think we deserve. But I can count to 4, so I'm going to leave it at that.
I would like to add some direction to the ARB. I can't remember under which motion we need to do that. But I would like to add some direction to have additional articulation or improvement of the wall on the north side.
Or just to pay special attention to the wall.
Right.
Bit loose.
Okay, so you made a motion. Was your motion for the DRP? Because we have the DRP and the parcel map and the STOA. So I feel like we've been talking about the DRP. So shall we start with that?
Yes.
Can I ask?
The motion on the floor is to approve the DRP with the modifications to the conditions, as Stephanie had on the screen, plus direction to the DRB to pay special attention to the north wall. It was moved by Commissioner Fresco and seconded by Commissioner Lambert. Commissioner Fontaine, were you speaking?
No, this was Kevin. I was just going to ask, can we comment on the conditions?
No, the public hearing is closed. Sorry, I'm being kind of hard.
I'm sorry, Chair. I'm concerned that some of the conditions, I want these conditions to be approved, but I'm concerned that there's a distinction between what's voluntarily being offered by the applicant and what we can actually require. And so maybe the city.
The only thing that's voluntary is the tree replacement, unless staff is going to correct me.
Could Heidi give us a rundown of what is okay for conditions and what might need to be in the voluntary description?
Do you think Heidi would jump in if she had a problem?
Okay, so
people have expressed concerns about this, that yes, we want this, but we want it in a certain way. And I mean, someone can make a motion to reopen the public hearing, but I'm not there. So
I'd like to hear from Heidi just to make sure we're solid here.
So procedurally, it was my understanding, and I could be wrong. So first of all, if Stephanie could share her screen just quickly to show which ones that there are a couple conditions that were presented to the commission that actually included an as agreed to by the applicant based on our understanding of what we believe is voluntary and what is not. So that's the tiebacks. And as you mentioned before, the trees. And again, staff may correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that part of the commission's discussion was based on an understanding by the applicant that from the applicant that most of the conditions would be based on the letter, and that was agreeable to the applicant. But I'm not sure that you have necessarily gotten confirmation on that. But that is up to the commission in that regard.
And just to follow up on Heidi's comment, these conditions that Stephanie has on the screen are based on the written correspondence from the applicant. I would say, just as past practice, and certainly it's the commission's decision, sometimes it is good practice to confirm that the applicant is in fact agreeable to the conditions as written.
I would like to hear what the applicant says, and I move that we reopen the public hearing in order to hear that.
Second.
Commissioner Commissioner Fontaine?
Yes.
Commissioner Fresco?
Yes.
Commissioner Lambert?
Yes.
Commissioner Landris?
Yes.
Commissioner Raskin?
Yes.
Commissioner Reese?
I abstain.
And Chair Pester?
I abstain. I only want to have discussion, like, Kevin, please limit your comments to very specific conditions. I don't want to reopen discussion. We're not doing additional questions and answers.
Absolutely. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I'm just going to make some comments, and then obviously it's up to the commission on what they want to do. I don't think there's a need to prohibit tiebacks. Tiebacks are only allowed if the adjacent property owner agrees to them. It may be that the city actually wants tiebacks on either the alley side or one of the street sides. So, I mean, we could agree that we wouldn't put tiebacks into the neighbor's property, but we can't do that anyway unless he allows it. So it's really not even needed. On the security gates, we just want to make sure it's clear that the gates that we have meet this requirement. We just want to make sure that there's not some expectation that we're going to do something different than what the plans show. On the 26-inch side, on the north side, I just want to point out that when you put in that language about being fully secured, that means that we'll have to put some kind of fence along the property line, because otherwise people can get from the north property parking lot onto that area. So I just want to make sure that that's understood. And then I think Commissioner Raskin made a very good point on the trees. The city has requirements about replacement of public trees. It might be just easier to say with regard to the private trees on the north property, we'll consistently do what the city requires for public trees. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, let's close the public hearing again. And will the makers of the motion, do you want to modify any of the proposed conditions?
Yes, I think all of the things he said were clarifying and clean, and that we should do what he requested.
Okay, so specifically, you want to delete the tieback condition. You want to, Stephanie, modify the language on the security gates to say as shown on the plan. And then you're suggesting that the trees condition be?
Will we replace consistent with?
If I could say, we're not exactly sure what the public tree replacement policy is. So if you would like those trees replaced, we would recommend maintaining that condition.
Great.
Well, okay, if you can't confirm exactly what the public tree replacement policy.
He's just saying apply the public tree replacement requirements to the private tree. That's all it is.
Right, but Stephanie doesn't know what it is.
We're not sure what it is. As it's written, it doesn't really apply because it's an elaborate process. If you want to remove the tree, there's a tree fund, et cetera, et cetera. It doesn't really apply.
So do we want to put that in the project description that the applicant has offered to replace any trees that may be damaged or destroyed as a result of the construction? Yes. Let's just put that in the project description. I am agreeable to the removal of the securing of the 26 inches. My concern, and maybe you can tell me this, if the neighbor to the north side decides for whatever reason to put a fence around its property and creates the enclosed area, then we're going to have a problem on the south side. So you're making a good, Mr. Kozel's making a good point.
Can I speak to
Bernardi?
Yeah, can I speak to that? Commissioner, the neighbor to the north, his property is very well secured and has been for 30 odd years, whatever. So right now what's going to happen, the pink building, the raspberry building is going to come down, and then there's going to be like a 26-inch gap between the new building and the neighbor's fencing, enclosure, gate system. So all that has to happen is on either end, one on the alley end, one on the 20th Street end, just to close up that 26-inch gap. No new fence has to be built along the whole property line. Actually, it'd be better for the neighbors not to have a fence there, unless they insist on it, unless they want to have a fence there. It'd be better just to close the ends off
Yeah.
And we won't have the homeless problem of people sort of colonizing the 26 inches. Because once they're in, they're not going to just colonize 26 inches. They're going to colonize the whole planting strip where the neighbors' trees are. So what I'm saying is, this is not a problem the way we phrased it. I'd say just fully secured means gates at either end.
Yeah.
Commissioner Raskin?
Yeah, I mean, just getting back to the tree issue, I mean, like if the construction activities damage the trees, and arguably they'd be legally obligated to replace them anyway. So a little bit superfluous to include the condition, but you know, I don't feel too strongly.
Even private trees, Ellis?
You know, I don't think it's appropriate to opine on potential liability, but you know, there could potentially be liability in those circumstances.
Okay, so we've got a motion on the table. Does the maker of the motion want to change the tree condition in any way?
Can I ask a question, please?
Of course, Stephanie.
I'm a little confused by the end shall be fully secured, because now I don't, the screen that I usually use for the plans is actually taken up by this text. I thought that there's a parking lot to the north, not a building to the north on the north property line. So,
there is, but what Commissioner Fondo Bernardi is saying is that there's a fence there. Right. So you basically.
Okay. So you only need to yeah. Okay. Okay.
And if that's not the case, then they'll have to build a fence. So, okay, Jim, last comment, and then we need to be done.
I just want to be clear that on that neighbor's property, on his southern property line, there is not a fence along that property line. What boxes in that side is the actual building itself.
And the fence
so then they will have to create a fence.
Well, the fence on 20th Street is what protects it. You can't get into the parking lot. So you can't get onto the neighbor's property. So that 26 inches becomes, without a fence, becomes securable and in the purview of the neighbor, actually.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that.
I think we should leave it to the applicant to secure the area in the way that is most appropriate to the site. And if the DRB wants to weigh in on that, then they will get the chance to do that at the hearing.
Well, maybe it's fully secured. What we really mean is free of debris and settlement.
I think secured is the way to go.
Okay.
I agree. Can I just say?
No.
I'm sorry.
We're done.
Well,
do you have something
actually,
to add to the conversation?
I do, because Commissioner Fondo Bernardi said it better than I could have, and I think that's the point. To the extent that there is a gate, there are gates that prevent access to the north property from either 19th Court or 20th Street. The point is our definition of secured, and this can be in direction. It doesn't have to be in, but it should be stated explicitly. We are saying that the property has to be secured from the east and west.
That's what we're saying.
Right, but
I
apologize.
Property has to be secured.
Plan.
Okay.
I think this is fine.
Okay, great.
We are beating.
That's already been said. I'm calling the question. Let's please vote on the motion on the table, which is for the DRP with the conditions as modified on Stephanie's screen. And will the maker of the motion and the seconder confirm that that is the motion that they've made and is acceptable?
Yes.
I'm in love with the motion.
I love you, Nina.
Okay. Commissioner Fondo Bernardi?
Yes.
Commissioner Fresco?
Yes.
Commissioner Lambert?
Yes.
Commissioner Landris?
Yes.
Commissioner Raskin?
Yes.
Commissioner Reese?
No.
Chair Pastor?
Yes. Okay, can I get a motion on the STOA, please? And then we'll go, I'm sorry, no, a motion on the BTPM, please.
So moved.
Do we have a second? Okay, so moved by Commissioner Landris and seconded by Commissioner Fondo Bernardi.
Commissioner Fodder Bernardi,
Yes.
Commissioner Fresco,
Yes.
Commissioner Lambert,
Yes.
Commissioner Landers,
Yes.
Commissioner Raskin,
Yes.
Commissioner Reese,
No.
Chair Pastor.
Yes. Okay, can I get a motion on the STOA, please? As modified by the conditions. Can I have a second?
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Landers, seconded by Commissioner Lambert.
No, Raskin can do it if he wants.
Give it to Alice.
Raskin, by Raskin. So many seconds, I don't know what.
Commissioner Fodder Bernardi,
Yes.
Commissioner Fresco,
Yes.
Commissioner Lambert,
Yes.
Commissioner Landers,
Yes.
Commissioner Raskin,
Yes.
Commissioner Reese, and Chair Pastor.
Yes. So thank you for that. Moving on to item 7, we have no resolutions. Moving on to item 8, which is written communications, we have not received any. Moving on to item 9, which is Planning Commission member discussion items, we have none. So we move to item 10, which is public input. So the caller queue is now open, and Melissa has put up the number on the screen. We're going to put a 1 minute.
Have something.
Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Raskin.
Yeah, just a quick point of information. I noticed, actually, while we were in the meeting, that there's an item posted on the public comment for the upcoming Landmarks Commission meeting that I think might have been intended also for public comment for our meeting as well. I thought it was submitted to the Planning Commission comments. It was just a letter from Tom Clays about the next steps for the private tree ordinance. I just wanted to highlight that for the public's attention.
Melissa, was that submitted to to Planning Commission comments?
It was, but the box works for Architectural Review Board, Landmarks, and Planning Commission. Public comment for all 3 of those do go to the same inbox. So we did take the intent is that it was being shared for the upcoming Landmarks meeting on the 10th, but the agenda is online and it is linked to their agenda under item number 8.
Okay, so if it was meant for us, what would be the procedure here? Would it be read, or would we just acknowledge it?
If I may, it was addressed specifically to the Landmarks Commission.
It was, okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Commissioner Raskin, for bringing that up. It sounds like that was a little confusing. Okay, so now we are at public comment. The number is on the screen. We're going to do the 1-minute countdown. So the phone number is up and the caller queue is open. And if anyone in the public wants to call in the next 50 seconds, you will have an opportunity to provide public comment. So our minute is up and no one has called in unless Melissa tells me otherwise. So that item is done and we are adjourned. It is 8:30 p.m. Thank you, everyone. Happy New Year. Stay safe and healthy.